What if everything you thought you knew was just the beginning? What if reality isn't what it seems and consciousness stretches far beyond the limits of our understanding? Join us as we journey into the unknown, seeking truth, wisdom, and connection beyond the veil. Welcome to Transcendence, where the mysteries of the universe unfold, one conversation at a time. Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Transcendence with your hosts, Debz Shakti and Josh Rutledge. Debz, how have you been doing since we last spoke?
Man, I tell you what, Josh, I am in a whirlwind of abundance right now. The things that I've been working towards manifesting as far as the different areas of my work and things that I'm interested in, they all just kind of happened all at once a couple of months ago, and they are intensifying. So I don't like to say I'm busy. I like to say I am full of manifestation right now. So I'm great. I'm feeling great. How about you?
The same. Since, last recorded for the podcast, you and I did a quantum hypnosis session together, and I've just been reeling off of just the information and insight that came through for me in that session. And so for those that are listening that may not know, that's what Debz does. She does quantum hypnosis and a bunch of other cool stuff to help you kind of figure out what's going on in your world. So I'm just reeling from that. And it seems like doing that session really opened a door for a lot of other stuff to flow through.
Not surprised.
And the big takeaway that I had from that session, which is really funny because it's something that my guides have been telling me for years, is that not to doubt myself.
Oh yeah.
So every time that I'm doing anything at all, really, whether it be in the mundane world or in the mystical world, and I start to feel like maybe I don't really know what I'm doing, I just squash that right away and say, nope, I got this. And I just power through it. So. Wow.
Well, I'm proud of you, Josh, because, those sessions are so incredibly profound, and you go so deep into yourself, but they don't stop when the session stops. That's kind of just the launching pad.
Right.
And then all sorts of things start happening, and it can be a little discombobulating, to be honest, so I encourage people to always just, get back with me and say, hey, I'm experiencing this, or I had this memory, I don't know what it means. But what the real purpose of that work, I'm finding out after 45, 50 years, is to learn to trust implicitly yourself.
Mm-hmm.
When you can trust what you have inside yourself, which is infinite wisdom and the ability to use it properly, the self-confidence, the resources that you need, everything just kind of starts to be pulled in to the center of your being. And sometimes that can be really kind of, I don't want to say scary, but confusing when you are used to living life in the 3D where it's a real struggle and you've been told you're not all that,
Yeah, and I think that, as someone who's recently gone through kind of a spiritual awakening where, 3.5, 4 years ago, I would have considered myself more of a agnostic person or atheistic person from that regard, but now have become more of a spiritual type person, still not really following or adhering to any religious practice, but still more of a spiritual person, believing that, or not believing, but really knowing that there is something bigger than me. And so just to say that somebody who's gone through that, it can be scary at times because it completely shakes your understanding of reality at that moment that you're in and causes you to really question what that reality is for you. And knowing, as you grow also in that journey, that the reality for you is different than the reality for me and the reality for my wife and so on and so forth. That we're all experiencing this world or this existence in our own spacesuit, interacting with it in our own unique way.
Right. And the visor, the lens of that spacesuit that you're looking out at the world is colored by your past experiences. So everyone, as you know, could be witnessing the same thing, and they are going to describe it differently, and they're going to integrate it differently and experience it differently.
It's just going to hit them potentially in a completely different way.
Yeah, it's incredible, but it can be a little discombobulating if you're used to being on the single track of conventional human existence in this culture. But this is why I love this work so much, because it literally, I used to say, it cracks your cosmic egg open, right? I look at all of us as little cosmic eggs floating around out there. But when the eggshell cracks and you see that life isn't just what's inside that little egg, whoa, right? But also, whoa. Yeah.
Well, and I think even to kind of, continue on with that analogy, sometimes we also, I don't think, realize or appreciate all that is within our egg.
Yes.
I was talking, as you know, I talk to my kids on the way to school each morning, and sometimes we listen to the radio and we call into the radio show and share stories and stuff, but sometimes they'll ask me a question. So this morning they asked, and I hope I don't offend anybody when I state what they asked, but they asked why older people drive so slowly. And I don't really know that I have an answer. And I told them, I said, this is the best that I can come up with. But when you're young, or even when you're older and you're working, we live in a society, especially in America, in the United States of America, where it is go, 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 push, push, push. What is the next thing I need to do? And then once that's done, what is the next thing? And so on and so forth. So when you're driving, you're wanting to get to whatever that next thing is quickly.
Yeah.
But when you get older and you're able to maybe retire or even just slow down and work part-time or whatever at your own pace, you grow to appreciate the time between the things that you have to do. And so in that moment, you slow down, you drive a little slower, you do the speed limit instead of always rushing to where you need to be.
Right. You appreciate it so much more. As a valid, getting really old person, I will tell you, that's exactly what happens. Coupled with, as the body, as the spacesuit ages, your perceptive abilities, not just your eyesight and hearing and all that, which they all kind of start to, deteriorate a little bit, unless you're super duper lucky. But things like depth perception and balance and spatial perception can change. Sometimes it's so slowly and gradually that you don't notice it until suddenly you're one of those old people driving, 40 miles an hour on the highway and somebody's honking at you and you're like, oh, why am I doing that? When I do that, and it's embarrassing to admit it, I check in with myself and I check in with my body. And I find out that my body is being overly cautious because its peripherals are not working as well as they used to. So there's double stuff going on there. But that's a good question that your kids ask. I used to just be livid as a, 50 years of commuting person with people who would not at least drive the speed limit or stay in their lane or whatever. Not that I would rage at them or anything. I've always been a peaceful person, and I've always tried to just send love and encouragement to the person. But I'm like, why do they do that? Why is that old lady doing that? Well, now I know. But I will tell you, having retired from corporate life, not commuting very much, unless I have to, go somewhere, there is what you just talked about is very valid. It's very real. We start to, as you get older, and I used to roll my eyes at people for saying this too, my elders, as you get older, your perception of time speeds way up, way up. Like what I did a year ago seems like a few weeks ago. It's incredibly weird, so it's relativity.
Right.
Albert Einstein was right. But how that impacts us is we start to, if we're, introspective enough, we start to really relish just how much is going on in the time we have allotted and possibly what little time we have left. And so we do stop and smell the roses a lot more, some of us. I do. So it's not just driving slowly, it's actually trying to pack as much into a day as I possibly can without just skimming the surface of it. Right?
Well, I think when you're younger and you've got maybe children that you're taking care of or whatever, and their schedules are busy, which it just adds to your schedule, and it just the week just flies by. I mean, this week has flown by for me. So even just thinking that years from now I may be able to slow down to accept and experience life, but also knowing that time is going to feel different. So
yeah, it will, unless we discover a way to make it not so. But it's all good,
Yeah.
But I think this little discussion bears a deeper message for us, and that is our perceptions create, along with our vibrational or emotional state, your reality. What you focus on is what you get.
Right.
If you're constantly saying, oh my God, I don't have enough time for this, oh my God, you're not going to have time for any of it. It's just because the universe takes you literally. And so what you think, feel, and even focus on as things to perceive is going to give that higher self, the universe, source, the information that it needs to give you more of what you need, of what you want. And it does not know when you say, I don't want time to go too fast for me, because it doesn't understand negatives. It's all literal. So
right.
all it hears is time going fast, time goes faster.
It reminds me of that movie with Adam Sandler, Click. I don't know if you ever saw it.
Yes, awesome movie.
I think it's also
with the remote control. Yeah.
I can't remember the guy who played. I think he's God, but he gives. It's talks like this. I can't think of his name right now. But anyways,
I might
he's
be
a well-known
movies.
actor.
Is it Morgan Freeman?
No,
I know he plays God in a couple of other movies.
Yeah, no, it's like I can think of a movie he was in, The Omen. He played like an angel. Like I can think of all kinds of movies.
Yeah. I can't say his name. It doesn't matter.
I guess that's the age. But it'll probably come to me like right before we end the podcast. It'll come to me. So, Christopher Walken is.
Christopher Walken, one of my favorite actors. How could I forget he was in that movie?
He's the one that gives Adam Sandler the remote. But if you've never seen the movie, if you're listening, watching, never seen the movie, number one, it's a good movie. But number two, the premise is that he gives a remote where he can skip past what he feels is unimportant things in life.
Yeah.
And what he realizes when he gets much older is that he missed so much that happened in the minutia of life, trying to skip past those things.
Right. So, we've heard the old saying, the devil's in the details. Well, if you fast forward through a lot of your life, whether you have a cosmic remote control or you're just filling up your time with stuff to fill time, like, binging on a TV series every night for 3 hours or whatever. No disrespect to people who like to do that. I like to do it once in a while. But to really appreciate everything. It's what the teachers have always told me, and I teach in with my clients and my students. Make everything that you do a sacred act. Make it holy. Mm-hmm. When you do that, you're actually focusing on it. You're actually cherishing it. You're loving it. You're tasting it, relishing it, I guess is the word.
Yeah. You're fully,
Even if
deeply
it's doing the
experiencing
dishes.
whatever that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Cool. So I think that kind of gets us a little bit towards the main topic that I wanted to talk about today in our show, which is the idea of soul contracts.
Right.
This is a term that I think I always kind of knew about them. I just didn't have a word or a phrase to associate with it. But that whole idea of feeling like you're here for a specific purpose.
Yeah.
I think that's where that soul contract comes into play. The idea is that, though, that I think that a lot of people look at their life and say, I'm here for a reason, but they think that reason is determined by some other entity or deity or whatever the case may be. But in all actuality, they went to the shopping mall of life before they incarnated and picked out the things that they were going to try to do and achieve in this lifetime in the a la carte cafeteria. And then that's what they came in with.
Yeah. No, I agree with you 100%. There is no Charlie for Charlie's Angels. There is no, I can't remember the head guy for Mission Impossible's name, but there is no one giving you a mandate. There is only you and the different, levels of yourself working with this one to give you what it is you want to explore. That's all we're here for. So right. Soul contracts to me aren't something that you are, given like a soldier is given an order. It's something that you work with the universe, YO universe, to give yourself so that you have something kind of tangible to work with when you come into this place or any place. And what's cool is, at least from all the perceptions I've had of all the sessions I've had where people go in and talk about their soul contracts because they really want to know. It's one of the biggest topics I deal with in quantum hypnosis or even in the channeling. Doesn't matter. It's still the same. Is that it's not just me, it's the other versions of me that we call other people, right? And we're all playing certain parts, given this kind of very loosely written script or overview of a script, but we write the script as we're going along. For the most part.
There's a quote that I saw that was, "You are the main character in your story."
Oh yeah.
But
absolutely.
And thinking about the way that I the analogy that I used just a few minutes ago around the kind of cafeteria, if you will. And so you picked off the carrots and the ranch and the celery and peanut butter, and you put all these things on your plate, and then you went to sit down to enjoy and taste every single thing that you put on your tray. And that's, I think, the idea behind what you're here to do. It's not prescriptive in that you're here to start X company, employ X number of employees. It's more experiential. You're here to fall in love. You're here to experience death of a close friend or family member. Things like that that will help shape you, like we've talked about in previous episodes around kind of the reason and the purpose that you're here is really to have those experiences and how they shape you and influence you across your other existences.
Absolutely. And that's something that most people don't think about until they get into this work and realize all of it is connected. All of your infinite realities, all of your infinite versions are constantly communicating and referring to each other and helping each other. In this particular construct where we're kind of focused, third dimensional Earth and human life, most of that communication is cut off. It's almost like we have earplugs and eye shades on, and until you have this kind of awakening experience that you and I have talked about before, you're not even cognizant of it, or maybe you've heard of it and you're like, well, that's just woo-woo stuff. But until it impacts you in a way that you really directly understand it, it's just going to be some nebulous idea, but it is true. And so everything you're doing here benefits the rest of creation, which is also you. If you pare it down to just this reality, it still is benefiting everybody here. And I wince because that means even the stuff that some of us might deem as negative or mistakes or, causing suffering, it's all important because it's playing into at least one other person's agenda for coming here, right?
Well, and like we know, right? We this is not really mystical. This is just, from a psychological perspective. We know that we learn the most when we fail, right? And so we have to have in those again, kind of switching it back over to the mystical space. We have to have those perceived failures,
right,
in order to grow and be able to apply what we learn in those situations to additional experiences that we're having.
Exactly. I mean, the failures, the negative experiences, whatever you want to call them, are just part of the yardstick. It's part of the metrics that we use for how's it going? How's this whole journey going for you, So it's fascinating. It can be frustrating. It can be annoying. It can be painful even. But it can also be joyful, beautiful, exciting, exhilarating. The difference is in us, me, perceiving it and trying not to label it, but just gain the experience fully. Even the hard feelings.
Yeah.
Because that's what you came here for.
Exactly. Everything, right?
Everything.
Really opening up to experience it all.
Yeah.
And one thing that I recently started thinking about, as it relates to kind of, again, your soul purpose, your soul contract, and the reason why everyone is here, is that after you went through the cafeteria and you picked out your tray items, you then went to the tech gadget store and you picked out the skills and abilities that you were going to need in order to really take advantage of everything that was on your tray. And so taking the time when you're starting out to look at things like the My Human Design chart and numerology and your astrology chart, and not so much focusing on, you can get bogged down in why these things are valid or whatever, but really looking at what does it mean? What personality traits did you bring into this existence that are meant to help you taste all the things on your tray? And so really diving into whether or not you understand where numerology comes from, regardless of that, it has insights to give you about yourself that you can use to navigate life.
Yeah, all those things. My guru said this long ago. My yogic lineage, Kriya lineage, is very astrology based, believe it or not. A yogic lineage is astrology based. When you dig down, most yoga lineages are. It's so weird because astrology, tarot, numerology, all these things you just talked about in human design are based on the fact that the symbology that you're looking at, the archetypes, the information, is a karmic roadmap. It gives you something to look at to know where the potholes might be, And when I say potholes, not just the things coming up in your future that you need to watch out for or be excited about, but where are the potholes in your own being? Where are the weak spots? Do you have a low tire somewhere on your vehicle, right? Is that low tire something that it might have a little nail in it? That nail being, if we're using symbology, that nail might be someone hurt your feelings a long time ago really deeply, and you're still leaking
Right.
your life force from it, right?
Right. You're just driving along with that nail in there instead of taking the time to pull it and patch it, you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Or even change the tire.
Yeah.
So it's these things, it's so cool because I love this. No matter what place you come at this from, there's always a technology and a technique to really understand the self. We have this built in. At least we were wise enough before we came here to give ourselves that.
Right.
But you have to be open enough to explore it.
And when you think about the idea that so much can be learned about who you are from things like astrology and numerology bases itself, heavily on things like your birthday,
Exactly.
the last name that you were given at birth, things like that. That all of that stuff was of your choosing, right? You chose to be born on a specific day so that you would have the tools that come along with, almost really, if you think about it this way, you would have the power that comes along with being born within a specific astrological sign. You chose your parents. So again, you would have the power that comes along with having a specific spelling of a last name or the familial ties that come along with being born into that family. You chose all of it before you decided to come into this existence.
You did, and you did it in a mastermind session with the other players.
Yeah.
Or also you, but you know what I mean? So you literally create all this stuff before you come here. You give yourself all of these gifts, all of these tools to carry in your backpack, but then most of us forget we even have a backpack for a while at least. But
I think about, the way I speak a lot in analogies, so
me
bear with
too.
me, but
that's why we work together so well. We understand each other.
I think about the life that we start, because we go through life for usually some distinguished period of time before we have our awakening and we get access to the toolbox. And so I think about it in the means of an apprenticeship versus kind of being given to go out on your own, to being a professional. So in the first part of life, we're an apprenticeship and we don't have access to all the tools that a professional would have access to because we're still learning ourselves and what we're capable of. But then once we have that awakening and now we're ready, now we get access to the full toolkit and everything that comes with it.
I love that. That's a great analogy. I mean, you can't just do brain surgery because you enrolled in your first year of med school.
Right.
They're going to let you come in and study and hear the lectures and maybe even observe some things, but they are not going to give you that scalpel for several years. And thank goodness, right? We don't want to give our babies the matches, basically, if anybody remembers what matches are at this point. But we don't want them to burn the house down or burn themselves. So I love that. But the soul contract thing, I think the thing that really trips people up is the fact that they feel like they are stuck having to work with the people that are, causing them all of this suffering or, boredom or whatever. Or they have to continue to do the same thing they've always done. And the whole point of the soul contract is for us to understand by virtue of pinging off of each other and these experiences and how we feel about them, what our next step is. We always have free will. So the soul contract is just, it's, I don't want to say just, it is more of an overarching kind of plan or roadmap for you and a group of people in your soul cluster that you work with often to come here and at least have some sort of starting point, but you have free will to completely tear it up even if you want to and start something new while you're here.
Well, I always think
we can do.
Right, and another analogy is when you go to college for the first time.
Oh yeah.
Right, if you're going to college for the first time, you've got a list of classes that you have to take. but it's really up to you as to whether or not you take those classes. Now, there are consequences, because if you don't take the classes and you don't learn what you need to learn, then you might have to repeat some of those classes.
Exactly.
And I think that's true in life as well. If you don't really learn the lesson that you're here to learn, you may have to repeat and re-audit that class.
Exactly. I mean, you and I even know from just basic psychology, if you skip over a developmental step, for instance, in your childhood, there are consequences. You can't skip certain steps, or you revisit them, or they become distorted as distorted behavior later on in your life. And so that click mentality of fast forwarding through all of the stuff that doesn't really resonate with you, that's where all that comes in. And I see it everywhere now. I see people who have fast forwarded through certain experiences in their lives, and they're paying for it with suffering, even though they don't realize that's where it came from.
Right. And it's, it's a lot like, when you read a book, or if you watch a movie, the first 30 minutes or 40 minutes or first few chapters of a book are all about character building before that character starts interacting with, all the stuff that's going to happen in that story. And that's the same thing for us. We have to build a foundation. And so, one of the things that I've started to do is, like you talked about, I think the way I've phrased it is magic in the mundane. But you said, I think every experience is I can't remember the word you used. Sacred.
Holy or sacred, yeah.
Yeah.
A sacred ritual, basically.
Right. But finding magic in everything. Yeah. So one of the things that I've started to do is when I go or am doing anything that involves other people or even just myself, is to pull back in my mind, not physically, but to pull back in my mind and observe everything that's happening around me. How are other people reacting? How are my animals, observe them while I'm also doing the thing that I'm, participating in. And it may be tiresome at times to divide your focus amongst a bunch of different activities, but it also can be very insightful is to thinking about how people interact with a different situation differently, putting yourself, if you can, in their position, thinking about it from, their perspective. All of that can give you deep insight into your own life and your own experiences.
It absolutely can. You use the word dividing your attention, I think, up amongst all this stuff. I like to think of it as integrating your attention with all of these things. People are so used to being programmed to multitask these days that they're throwing out the baby with the bathwater, man. If you are doing 10 things at once, it's admirable that you're trying to do 10 things at once, but are you diluting what you're doing because you are not able to or don't want to spend time making each of those 10 things something that is in your sacred vision?
Yeah, I've always heard that if you're multitasking, you're doing 10 things half as well versus one thing 100% as well. So, and that's, I see that in my professional life. I see it in my personal life. I've got over here on my right, I've got a whiteboard that has all the projects on it that I've got going on at any given time. And they're little, sometimes they're little things like I've got to make some mirrors for our master bathroom. And then there's another one where I'm trying to work on finishing an all sky camera that I'm creating to take night pictures of the sky and stitch it all together in time lapse. So it's stuff like that, or editing this podcast,
Exactly.
But as I try to focus on one thing at a time and then get it done, because if I try to, again, do multiple things, I miss steps. I forget things. I go to the store to buy stuff to make the mirrors and think that I'm going to also get to stuff that I need to do this. But while I'm there, I see something that distracts me. And then next thing you know, I get home and I have to go back to the store to get the next set. So taking the time to focus on the things that You need to now. Granted, there are times, especially like if you're taking care of children or aging parents or whatever, where you don't have the luxury of being able to sit down and focus on one thing at a time. And I understand that. But I think it's worth evaluating and say, if I don't have 100% to give to whatever the thing is that thing going to suffer? Not necessarily painfully, but I mean,
Right.
is it not going to be what I expected or wish it to be
Yeah.
because I don't have the time? And if so, set it off to the side and
Yeah.
come back to it.
Absolutely, if possible. And, again, I'm getting to be a really older person, and I'm just now starting to realize that as a double Aries who blasts through life and has been really pretty good at juggling a million things at once. Now I'm starting to realize, oh gosh, a lot of that stuff I didn't do real well. I just checked it off my list, right? But I want everything I do now to have that immersive, kind of comprehensive, holistic feel to it, because that's what real life is. It's not bits and pieces that you categorize and put in little cupboards or cubby holes like the old time mailroom. It's one whole thing, and each thing is connected to the others. So these soul contracts, although some people, usually people don't come to me about soul contracts unless they're having a problem with the person or thing that they're doing, right, the soul contract with. Usually it's about people, and they want to know if I can help them break it, And I'm like, okay, well, let's go in first and find out why you have that soul contract and what its purpose is. 9.999% of the time, once that's over with, people go, oh, yeah, I don't think I need to break it. I think I need to interact with it better.
Yeah.
So it always comes back to you, doesn't it?
It does. Every single time.
It always comes back to you. Even though, someone might be a real, whatever, insert nasty word here that you want to you. Maybe the soul contract is that they caused you so much pain that you actually get up the nerve to leave the relationship and empower yourself and do something different. Even so, there is a piece that is very important for people to understand in this process, and that is unconditional love and forgiveness, and then releasing. Allowing them to be them without affecting you anymore, right?
Right.
Now, if they're an ex-murderer and they're going around killing people even after you get out of the relationship, part of your responsibility as a good person is to report that somewhere, right? And that's part of that person's soul contract too, having to deal with the consequences of their actions. But
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead, Debz.
No, I'm finished. I could go on and on about that.
Well, and I think that a lot of times people, like we all know, right, individually, that, or maybe some of us don't know, but we find out if we go to therapy, if we talk to someone, we find out that we are a product of our environment.
Absolutely.
Everything we do, the way we act, the way we respond to things is all based on how we've been affected by whatever that activity was in the past. And so when you realize that that's true about yourself, then it also must be true about everyone you interact with.
Bingo. Wow.
So
big,
if someone
big
is,
realization.
if someone is a nasty insert word to you, they are likely doing it because they're a product of their environment.
Exactly.
Now, that doesn't mean you have to sit there and take it. And it also doesn't mean that it's your thing to fix.
No. Oh, big one. Big point.
But understanding that, they didn't come into this life with the expectation of being a nasty SOB to someone that they, at some point in time, loved.
Exactly.
But they're a product of their environment.
I had a teacher once who used the phrase when describing such people as a person who is woefully forgetting of their own divinity. Woefully forgetful of their own divinity. because we all have that divine spark in us. As you said, we all come in a perfect being, and then our environment starts to interact with us for good or for ill, depending on your perception. And that helps to mold us into, the person that's walking around. However, again, need to stress, that's not set in stone. It's not a death sentence. Right. It's also not a pedestal raising thing for you. Mm-hmm. You have to decide what you do with what you are given, and whether you courageously and heroically overcome what your environment has done to, mold you, or you take what your environment has done and you do the best that you can with the gifts that it's given you. Again, it's all about self-empowerment and trust.
Yes, it is. And taking an opportunity to learn and understand that environmental impact.
Yes.
What you started your journey with, what you've gained along the way, and how that's meant to impact how you finish out your journey.
A huge point. Again, from a yogic perspective, someone once asked my guru when I was really young, what's the whole purpose of your yogic practice? And you could insert any practice here, mm-hmm. Your belief system, whatever. And he said, it is simply to have a conscious death. Because when you are completely consciously self-aware at the moment of leaving that spacesuit, taking that spacesuit off, then you can decide where you want to go next and what you want to focus on, instead of having to go through kind of, all this introspection, retrospective, how did I do this, report card kind of thing, whether that's your belief system or not. I really liked that, because literally the moment we are born dying, mm-hmm. right? So why not spend your life trying to have the best life you can and do the most that you can for life around you, so that when you leave this one, you feel pretty good about it, mm-hmm. right? That old saying, what do you want on your epitaph, or how do you want your obituary to be read? It's something to ponder, and it's something I do ponder an awful lot,
And I think, knowing what's important, what's really important to you, will help influence, kind of the way you think about that. If you think, well, he started a Fortune 50 company and he ran it until he retired, and then that may be one way of looking at it, but what else did you influence or gain along the way of doing those physical world activities?
Exactly. And how did that impact the world? Did you make your fame being one of the richest people in the world by exploiting other human beings, or by helping other human beings? Once you got the money, were you able to spread that around, And it's all good, but I love the thought of being consciously self-aware all the time, so that you can have a conscious death, or what mm-hmm. the yogis call Mahasamadhi. One of my favorite authors, Kurt Vonnegut, wrote in one of his stories, when the hero died, his headstone read, "Everything was beautiful and nothing hurt," even though he had gone through tons mm-hmm. of crap in his life, right? And so what's funny is that's what's on Kurt Vonnegut's headstone now. Mm-hmm. Everything was beautiful and nothing really hurt. Because when you look at it from hindsight, you're like, oh yeah, it was all purposeful. Even the stuff that didn't feel good, it was all beautiful.
Yeah, I'm going to close up in just a minute. I want to end off though with this. I'm watching a show with my wife called The Man on the Inside, and it's got Ted Danson in it. It's on Netflix. It's a fantastic show. They've renewed it for season 2, which is uncommon for Netflix. Anyways, towards the end of the show, towards the end of the last episode of season 1, Ted Danson, his character and another character are sitting talking about, life, and they're older in life. They're kind of looking back on things that have happened. And, Ted Danson's character explains how he met his wife, and he says, it was really kind of a miracle. And the other character says, when you're older and you're looking back, all of life is a miracle.
Oh, I love that.
And so I think that the change that has to happen maybe is to look at in the moment as all life being a miracle.
I love that so much, because it really is, Josh. As much as I hate to admit it, even the stuff that is not my favorite is a miracle. Love it.
So, well, thank you all so much for listening in and watching. This is available in podcast form on some players if you happen to prefer more of an audio version. It's not in Apple Podcast yet, but I am working on getting it in there. Apple's giving me a little bit of a headache, and I'm enjoying that from a conscious moment.
Thank you, Josh.
If you would like to work with Debz for quantum hypnosis or any of her channeling or anything, where can they go? How can they get in touch?
Just my website's best, debzshakti.com. And, there's a schedule on there. There's a whole menu of things that I do. If you want something specific, or if you just want, whatever comes, that's great too. And then on most social media platforms, it's Debz Shakti, except for Facebook, which is DL Buller, because Facebook won't let me use my separate name.
Facebook was a pain in the butt.
Yeah. It's okay.
Yeah.
We bless it. We love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for being here.
And I highly encourage. Oh yeah, I was going to say, I highly encourage you to also follow Debz on social media, because several times of the year she'll post discount offerings and things like that for several of her services. So you want to be able to take advantage of those.
Catch that as soon as you can.
And then if you want to work with me, I'm just now getting started. I am offering mentor services, channelings, readings, anything that you would want to work with me on. You can start that process by going to mysticjourneysllc.com, and there's a contact me form on there. It sends me an email, and that's the best way to get started. Because I want to talk to you first and see kind of what you're looking for, and then we'll figure out the best path to get you where you were trying to go. So
I love it so much.
So thank you all so much again for listening. And please, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel or favorite the show on a audio podcast. And that way you won't miss anything that's coming out in the future. So thank you again.
A lot of cool stuff coming up.
And we'll talk at you later.
Thanks.